All right, we are back with Beyond Baseball, episode number 5. I am powered by Prospects Live. I am here with Dr. Caleb Mezzi, as always. Caleb, how are you doing today?
I am pumped. We had a great conversation, and I'm really just interested to see how Major League Baseball kind of ends their season. Then we go into the playoffs, so it's a good time of the year. Weather's changing, as we were talking about before. A little drop in
Yep.
the weather kind of brings that fall feel.
Yeah, love the fall time. Means though the only sad part about fall time is baseball is about to be done for the season. We're getting into minor league playoffs this month. We'll have major league playoffs next month. But one thing that's kind of happening for the transition for a lot of minor leaguers is going into the off season. Caleb, from your perspective, working on career transitions and things like that, how can the off season help minor leaguers kind of develop themselves outside of the game?
Yeah, I think one of the first things that we know, is it's a break. So it's a break from the game, the
Mm-hmm.
workouts, the grueling season, mentally and physically. So I think just taking that break, mental and physical, is key. But then also just getting into some kind of rhythm for the person, right? Whatever that may be, whether you're a morning person or a night owl, having some kind of routine, having some kind of rhythm, and then challenging yourself. So I think each person needs to stay physical. So I'm not going to talk about that because that's not my area of
Yeah.
expertise. But the mental side, I think, is also where we need to stay stimulated. So how do we stay stimulated? I think depending on who you are, the age you're at, where you are in your career, and where you see yourself going, whether it's retiring in a few years if you're not in Double A or Triple A, I think a lot of things can come back to education, and the other part is, as we've mentioned, I think you gave a perfect example a little bit ago, is following your passions and really following your efforts, right? So where are you putting your efforts? What are you doing networking wise? Are you out there? Are you talking to these people? Are you meeting with these people? And are you learning around the things that you are seriously interested and skilled in? So that's kind of like the overarching thing. It's really hard to kind of give blanket advice based off of the person, but having a start to that process this off season, whether it's your last off season or not, is just really a good start for anybody.
Yeah, and I think that one things that we talked about with Jacob Turner on one of the last episodes too is how he used road trips basically to kind of just go reach out and meet people to find these other opportunities and passions outside of the game. And that's kind of what the offseason presents to these guys. Yeah, they're going to go through their offseason routines. They're going to go through the same day to day to get themselves ready for the next season. But it's also, like you said, an opportunity to go to school, do some classes, or have the opportunity to meet and network within their community and find these new passions. And the guest we had on today, today as in right now, but was Ryne Ogren, and he talked a lot about how he used the off season to kind of find himself. What were some of your favorite things about that interview?
Yeah, well, it's a good topic just to discuss with Ryan, because one of the things I was also going to add is it never hurts to just take a step back and do like a self audit and
Mm,
understand, what do I want to learn, but then also how do I learn that thing. So like learning styles, we've always heard in like school you're either an
yeah,
audio learner, but I don't think it's that black and white. I think there's different ways. You can learn some specific area or interest or topic, reading it, writing it, talking to people, watching a YouTube video, listening to a podcast, even. And, our guest Ryan had a really good sense of how he learned. He also had a really good sense of who he was and what he was interested in. So, one of the things that stood out to me, to answer your question, is how driven he was on and off the field, but how the similar leadership skills as a shortstop, as a catcher, and in running your own business and really just doing any business activity just kind of translated so well, because he did know how he learned. He knew what he was interested in. He knew that he wanted to kind of, use the phrase bet on himself
hmm
to come out on top. I mean, he's a true testament to that. And I think the other thing is he really understood, kind of where he was in his position. So he understood that he might not have made it to the highest level in baseball, and that he might have to start again at the lowest level in business, but he was willing to work that ladder and climb it, because when it comes down to it for himself, he said his work ethic translated really well. And I think we, without seeing him work, we saw that he has a really good work ethic.
Yeah, and I think the one thing outside his drive that really impressed me, and I think a lot of fans will resonate with, and current minor league players as well, is the fact that he would take control of the situations that he was in. He would never let the situation control him. He was always like, no, this is not what I want to do anymore. And I'm going to make this step and decide it for myself. And I think that's one thing that I think everybody will take away and really enjoy. But without further ado, we want to bring you right to that interview. Here's the interview with Ryne Ogren.
Welcome back to Beyond Baseball. We have a great guest with us today, Ryne Ogren. He's going to talk to us about his journey through the minor leagues and kind of what he's doing now. We're going to learn more about him as a person, but then also like what he's doing and what he did when he was playing baseball and beyond. Ryne was a 12th round pick from the Seattle Mariners from Elon University. He is a local guy to where I am in Philadelphia, so that's kind of how we connected, and we'll probably talk more about that. But to kick us off, Ryne, give us some details on your process from going from, I guess, Conestoga High School to Elon to the Mariners, and then what happened after that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on, guys. Love what you're doing and happy to be a part of it. But pretty much from Conestoga, I knew I wanted to go south to play baseball. I knew I wanted to play in college. And I knew I wanted to play Division I. But then it was just a matter of finding the right fit. So I wanted to play right away, and Elon offered me that opportunity. And then my other criteria were, is it a good baseball school? Are guys getting drafted out of it? Is it a good academic school? And are the girls hot? And so Elon satisfied all those, and that I decided to go there.
Yeah, so you talked about that criteria that I guess you made for yourself, but talk to us about the reputation that Elon had as a baseball school specifically.
Yeah, so mid-major school, and but they also play on the midweek. They'll play all those top ACC teams, so NC State, Wake, UNC, and a couple others. And I just wanted to be in the heart of that. And I think they have like 70 plus draft picks now. A few big leaguers, a couple first round picks. George Kirby's a starting pitcher with the Mariners right now, and he's dicing. So a lot of great baseball talent, a lot of great baseball history there. And I believe the school is putting a lot of money into the facilities, so they're growing. So,
all right. So then after you were at Elon, you get drafted by the Mariners. Talk about the process of going through that draft. Was it a surprise? Did you think the 12th round? What did that mean to you once you heard your name called?
Right. Yeah. So the process was great. It all kind of started, I guess, that summer before junior year for me. I went to the Cape Cod League and played there, and that's where a lot of those relationships kind of started with all the scouts. Then I went back to Elon in the fall and met with all 30 teams. That was pretty cool. Definitely a lot of meetings, a lot of questionnaires to fill out at that time. And that kind of got annoying, but got them all in on time. And so I met with all these teams. They're asking me all these questions about, kind of probing who I am as a person and, looking at like the makeup I guess I have. And then, they come and watch your fall practices and scrimmages. And then, come around the spring, all those guys show up again. And, you kind of see the big games when we play those ACC teams, they would show up again. But I kind of knew I had a really close relationship with the Seattle Mariners scout. And I kind of figured if there was a team that was going to take me, it was going to be, probably the Mariners. But I also thought, the Braves and the A's were going to be in the mix. But that, I've heard everywhere from, 3rd to 10th round going into draft day. And so, coming out of college, you're the big dog in the pond, and I was expecting to go a lot higher than I did. But so what seemed to be happening was a lot of those senior signs were bumping guys out of that 7 to 10 round range. So as day 2 started, and I still wasn't getting any calls, I started seeing a lot of seniors go, and my advisors at the time were saying that's what was going down. So kind of bumps everyone out of that, all the juniors out of that 7 to 10 range. And then, kind of definitely went lower than I thought I would, but, wasn't really complaining. I was still really happy that day.
Take us, I love your journey kind of through, but kind of take us through that transition from college to pro ball. I know you mentioned at college, you're like the big dog and you're out there and you're like the star of the team and things like that. how was that experience of going into pro ball, all of a sudden being to have like that reality check kind of hit and like, oh, all these dudes are talented as soon as you get there?
Yeah. So, I mean, in college, the only time I struggled really was my freshman year. I was starting as a freshman. I played every single game except for like one or two. And so then I played most of them at short too. I think I only played one or two at second base. And so, I hit probably 330. I think that was my career average, 340 or something like that. So not a lot of adversity there. And then getting drafted, not where I wanted to. It was kind of like, well, what are you guys looking for? And this was before they said OPS was, this was before that. This was 2018. So, batting average still meant something. And, I played pretty flawless at shortstop, and I figured, I had a great arm. I was going to go a lot higher. And then that was the first gut check, really. As soon as I went lower than I expected, I was kind of like disappointed in the game of baseball. But then you realize, when you show up on day one, you see, okay, these guys are legit. That they went ahead of you, they're legit. And so that going into mini camp so I got drafted by the Mariners. Went to Arizona and for a 3 to 4 day mini camp. And then that's when I kind of met everyone else around, and everyone was equal in talent. Really. We had a bunch of infielders. And after that, we went up to short season, which doesn't exist anymore in Everett Aqua Sox. But it definitely was a gut check. And it was, I don't know how you would, if I had to go back in time, I would just try and stay a little bit more humble, but there's no way to know what's ahead. You really don't understand how good everyone else is because they're at every other spot in the U.S.
Yeah, I love that kind of insight too, because I once interviewed the University of Georgia head coach, and he was like, I tell all my players, pro ball sucks. He's like, you got it made here at the University of Georgia. Like, you got all the facilities that you can think of. You got a coaching staff. You're like the elite guy. And he's like, yeah, pro ball, it's going to be a huge reality check for all these guys.
Definitely.
When you made that transition to pro ball, what were some of the things that you did and kind of implemented? Just because as on this show, we focus on the human side of the game and just kind of developing as human beings. What were some things while you were working through pro ball to kind of develop yourself outside of the game?
Right. So I think this was one of my mistakes, is I wasn't really doing anything outside of I was always my entire life really was just baseball and working on baseball. Everyone I grew up with would probably say the same thing, my parents as well. And that was just kind of who I was. So I really didn't do much outside of baseball at the time. It wasn't until I started to get more gut checks that I started to, kind of chill out off the field. And then, I started playing better after that.
What were some of those things that you did when you say chill out? I mean, what were the things that you kind of harnessed your off the field self to kind of get better, get back into a rhythm?
Yeah. So I think the easy one is video games. And I think that's what a lot of guys do. But I went like the opposite way. So I was playing a lot of video games, but then I figured I was, kind of wasting time. And that's just my personal view on it now. But at the time I'd fire up Fortnite faster than, my roommate would wake up. And so he would actually wake up to the Xbox starting up. But I would start reading a ton of books, and I would read everything, short stories, long novels, to business books, to mental skills, everything. If someone recommended it to me, I bought it on Amazon, and I have a giant book stack. I still do that to this day. But that was a big one. And then going on walks, you travel to so many different cities. So I'd wake up early and I'd just go, kind of walk the unique little town. And that kind of gets the wheels turning a little bit earlier, especially when I started catching. My legs were so sore, I would just walk it off. And that actually came from Nick Schufo. He's big leaguer with the White Sox, I think Orioles, and a couple others. But
so was there anything that you were doing to, harness those interests, right, that you had off the field? And, obviously the living conditions as a minor leaguer aren't the best, and we've kind of detailed that in this pod. But was there anything you were doing to, make money or just kind of keep yourself busy mentally? And I guess if the walks would be physically as well.
Yeah. So I guess I started it my second pro off season. So first pro off season, I went to Instructs, and that was in Arizona, Peoria, Arizona, for like 8 weeks. Came back, had 2 months, and then went back to spring training early. So second off season, that's when I started the wood shop. And so I out of my parents' basement, I started my own wood shop. I called it Ryne's Custom Wood Shop, RCW. And I'd make, pretty much anything that anyone had for me. It started with one of my sister's friends asked me if I could make a shot ski, those things that you and she lived out in California. So I had to figure out a way to make it and then ship it and we'll pack it and then ship it. And so I just said yes before I even knew how to do it, and just figured it out. And I was able to put magnets on the bottom of the glasses. So it was actually pretty cool. And I decorated it and everything, got it out there, and, made a good margin on it. So posted it to my Instagram. And then, next thing you know, I was off to the races, and I kept that going. So that went through my first off season, and then kept it going through COVID, that 2020 year, and then shut it down when I left for spring training in 2021.
Very cool. It's cool to see all the passions that you kind of developed outside of the game too, and kind of how they helped you with the different transitions. One big transition you had while you were playing was being traded to the Baltimore Orioles. Kind of take us through that, and what goes through the mindset when you find out that you've been traded, and kind of how you could develop ways through that.
Right. Yeah. This is actually a great story. This is after spring training in 2019. I got assigned to Low A, West Virginia, Charleston, West Virginia. If you've ever been to Charleston, there's not much there, but It's a great town, great people there. So if they are listening, miss you guys. But it was a kind of a unique start to the season for me. I was playing shortstop, pretty much every day, but I was kind of off to a cold start, and I was figuring it out. And then I went, I think back-to-back games, I hit a home run to left center, then I hit one to right center. And it was after that, the next morning I wake up, I'm watching Get Smart with Steve Carell in it, a great movie. And I'm actually living in the family room of an apartment in West Virginia, and I have 3 roommates. They all got bedrooms, but they put me in the family room. So we actually just hung a curtain, and I put my bed on the floor. And they gave me like a kind of makeshift place where you put all your clothes, and my room was just a curtain, really, and the kitchen was like on the other side of it. I actually loved it; it was great. And so I'm watching a movie there, and I hear my roommate making breakfast, and then all of a sudden I get a call from our head of player development, Andy McKay, and I talked to Andy a bunch, but not any during the season, and I was like, "Uh-oh, dude." Slow start, I'm getting released. And so I was like, oh shit, like I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on here, but then I answer the phone. I answer the phone. I'm like, hello, and I'm like kind of shaking. He's like, hey Ryan, what's going on? You got a second? I said, yeah. He said, we really appreciate what you've done with Seattle, but we just traded you to the Baltimore Orioles. I was like, what? And so I'm like, he's like on the phone giving me like a rah-rah speech, like telling me like, hey, thank you for doing the Mariners way. And, all the coaches love you, and you're going to have, a great career and everything. And I'm like, I can like hear it, but I'm like whispering to my roommates, I just got traded. And so he runs upstairs and wakes up my other 2 roommates. And then, so I say bye to Andy. I immediately text my agent, say, hey, I just got traded to the Orioles. He's calling me freaking out. I call my mom and say, hey, Mom, I just got traded to the Baltimore Orioles. And then the Baltimore Orioles were calling me. So I had to hang up on my mom mid-sentence. And then Kent Qualls, he's I forget his position with the Orioles now, but at the time he was the interim player development. He's still with the Orioles. I spoke with him before I retired. And so he calls me and said, hey, Ryan, we just traded for you. Happy to have you, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like kind of up in the air. And then as soon as I got traded, everyone was thinking, who did I get traded for? And I was just hoping it wasn't for like a bag of baseballs. And it turned out it was for a 5-year big leaguer, I believe, Mike Wright, and just 1 for 1. And I was stoked about that. And it was a really cool experience after After about 2 or 3 hours of excitement, I packed up my entire apartment. I had my truck out there, just threw everything in the back, drove to the field. My manager texted me congrats, said bye to everybody, packed in my locker, drove home. So it was 7 hours home from West Virginia back to Philly, and waited to be assigned to what affiliate I was going to with Baltimore.
What they sent you to Delmarva, right?
Right. So they told me I was going to Low A Delmarva, which is 2.5 hours from my house in Ocean City, Maryland. So I just drove home first, had a couple nights at home, and then showed up a little bit late so I could process. I remember packing, like, because we had my Seattle Mariners bags navy blue, and all my undershirts are navy blue and everything. So I took everything out, and I had one black undershirt, and then a pair of socks, and then all my other equipment. And I just put it all in that bag. I took all my Mariner stuff out and just showed up and had nothing. I really didn't have anything walking into that clubhouse. But I always kind of wish that every pro baseball player had the opportunity to walk into a new clubhouse for the first time, because it is a humbling experience. Everyone just turns and looks at you, and you have your new bags, and then everyone's trying to figure out what position you play. So if their position is safe. But yeah, it was a gut check for sure.
It's like first day of school. So you talk about thinking that you might get cut from receiving that call, or at least seeing Andy's name on your iPhone or whatever, to then hearing you got traded, and then showing up at the Orioles complex, and then you went through another transition. So talk to us about the transition between switching positions, and just how quickly did that happen after you got traded, that whole process.
Yeah, so I know the Mariners were actually toying around with me becoming a catcher around the end of Instructs, because I had such a good arm, but I wasn't incredibly fast at shortstop. And I was like all into it, because they had to give you some like really cool gear, and I just wanted the gear. Really, it was going to be cool. So, but I also thought, like, you don't really need to hit that well to be a catcher, and I could throw everyone out, block. Like, I would actually be a really good catcher. And I think my coaches in college said the same thing, but I just was so good at shortstop, they didn't see a need to change that. But so the Mariners were like talking to me about it, but we really didn't do much besides just, I'd catch a little bit off the machine here or there. When I went over to the Orioles, I actually had catcher's gear with me then. And so I would catch in between innings if I wasn't playing that day. Just for fun. I always thought it was fun, and I love the way I looked in the gear. So I'd throw the backwards skull cap on, throw the mask on top, and I thought that was sick. I just thought the look was cool. And one day not the Reds, I think he played for the Reds, Donnie Warner. He was the Orioles catching coordinator at the time, and he was watching me warm up one time, the pitcher, when I wasn't playing. He said, "Have you caught before?" I said, "No." He's like, "You can do this." And so I guess he saw that and passed it along to our manager, who was a catcher, Kyle Moore, who passed it along to the player development guys. And it was kind of on the back burner for a while, because I played shortstop, second, and third for the Delmarva Shorebirds that year in 2019. And when I showed up for spring training in 2020, I was still a shortstop. It wasn't until I showed up to spring training 2021 that the head of player development, Matt Blood, put me in the catchers group with Adley Rutschman. And that was the first day that I learned that they wanted me to become a catcher. It was first day of spring training 2021.
That's wild. Before I jump into my next question, I got to ask, who had the better gear, the Mariners or the Orioles?
So the Mariners gave me some like old gear, because I didn't want to waste a new set of gear on a converted guy. But they did have like cooler colors, cooler colors on the actual gear itself. They had like a turquoise logo on the mask, and it was actually pretty cool. But the Orioles, I just got like all black all-star gear, and then when I actually became a catcher, they gave me some nicer gear. So
nice.
Yeah, a little bit of each. It's all the same thing.
Yeah. So you talk about kind of your journey here. It's kind of transitioning positions, transitioning teams. Kind of what went into your decision making and figuring out whether to retire from the game or not. I'm just curious about what led you to make that decision and kind of step away from the game of baseball.
Yeah, so I mean, it was it was kind of a perfect storm, really. During COVID, I realized, I got a knack for business, and but when you're in the game, when you're playing, you don't think about your future really, besides being a big leaguer. So, but during COVID, I started doing Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Had all these other interests. Got my blue belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and
Nice.
I was just like kind of growing, not like rapidly outside of the game. And then going back to spring training, really not having worked on catching at all. And day one, them telling me they want me to become a catcher, and really saying I don't really have a choice if I want to play shortstop anymore. Like that would probably be it for me. And that was like a kick in the nuts, really, because I wasn't even expecting that. And now I'm expected to go out and compete, on a position, probably the hardest position on the field, without learning it, having time to learn it against the best players in the world. So I was kind of fighting a battle uphill after that. And I really didn't like the way they handled that. I feel like, we had a full season off. They should have told me before.
Yeah.
But I brought that up to them when I was retiring, obviously. And I said, that's just not how, that's just not really fair. But game's not fair, and life isn't either. So after that, I wasn't really even playing my position that I grew up with and that I thought I was good at. And so I kind of struggled all through 2021, really, because I didn't have, there was not even really a coach down in spring training to teach me how to catch and extended. They didn't have a catching coach down there. So I was left in extended spring training to learn how to catch by myself. And I just had a bunch of coaches kind of come together and help me. The pitching coach, Alan Mills, he pitched like 10 years in the show or something like that, maybe more. He was my catching coach. And so I had a picture as a catching coach. And it was kind of at that point in time, I realized like this is kind of a joke, but I'm going to do the best I can. Finished the year strong, got a promotion to high A, and I definitely struggled. Like, it took a toll on my legs. I couldn't feel my legs when I was hitting. It took a toll on my mind. Like the game was completely different. And then going into the off season, I was stoked because, I finally get some time to learn this thing. The Orioles brought me down for instructs because I really didn't have instruction, and just worked on it. Got really good, felt really confident. Receiving was there, framing, throwing, everything was there. Showed up to spring training 2022 this past year and just dominated. I raked, I threw everybody out, blocked, framed, received really well. And all of a sudden I was on the starting team in AA, which is what I expected to be because I was 25. I was turning 25. And then all of a sudden I'm on a backfield in low A, backing up an 18-year-old high school draft pick. And so that all happened within the last week. And so I got nothing against those guys, but I just was not going back to low A. They wanted to put me back there, and I just said, I'm not going to do that. You guys give me an opportunity to proceed, or not. We're not doing this. We're not going to waste time like this. And so I was, at that point in time, I just walked away from it.
Yeah, I just want the one thing I'll say before I turn over to Caleb for another question is that what I really liked that you did is you kind of took control of your own situation. And I mean, it's hard for a lot of guys to do that in a sense where they just kind of go with the flow. But you were like, no, I don't like the situation that I'm in. I'm going to find a way out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about your career. I mean, somebody might look at your career and say, wow, this was a short career. And, he had these ups and downs, but you've really been battle tested every step of the way. And it's like, even if it was, you felt like at your low, like you were going to get cut, you get traded. Even if you were doing your greatest, you get demoted or kind of not sure of what your positioning would be.
Yeah.
What I'm looking at is someone who then says, I really like business, right? And we heard a little bit about your off the field stuff, with, the wood shop stuff and all that kind of things. But the leadership skills were constant. You played shortstop, that's leadership position, and then they take you and move you to catcher, right? Those are two leadership positions. I mean, everybody always says when you're building a team, you go up the middle, and those are two of the three that are up the middle, right? So, like, what did you see, at least viewing yourself as a baseball player on the field? What did you take into your, what you're doing now, but also like those other interests that you had, those other side hustles that you had?
Right. Yeah. And so the Orioles put me into a leadership group, and I was in that group for 2 years. And that group had, Gunnar Henderson in it, Adley Rutschman, Kyle Stowers. We had the core that's up there. That was the group. And so obviously, yeah, once I kind of figured out, like I had to figure out what my skills were to transition out. But I knew I had a knack for business, and I knew that the night I was going to retire. So my decision to retire actually happened in 2 days. Once they put me in a backfield in low A, I went in and talked to Matt Blood, the head of player development, and that night before, I saw them all playing volleyball, and it just rubbed me the wrong way on the beach. He said it's like growing everyone together, and whatever. At the time, I was like just in a bad mood, so I saw it as. But I walked it back into his office, and I was just that night after speaking with him the first time. After I saw them playing volleyball, I was staring at the ceiling, didn't sleep that night, nothing. And I made the decision, like whatever I do next, it's going to have to be bigger than this. It's got to be more exciting. It's got to have more money, and it's got to be like something that's exciting. I don't know what it is, but it's going to be bigger. And, after I did that and made that promise to myself, then it was kind of a no brainer. I walked out of there. Everyone kind of stopped in their tracks when they heard I retired. All the coaches' jaws dropped. Like it was kind of nuts. Time stood still, at least for me. And everyone's like, I would say bye to everyone in the locker room. They're like, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I just retired." And so, but what was your question? Got it kind of getting sidetracked.
Well, I mean, let's take what you just said, because I think what we were talking about was what leadership skills you took on the field into your business.
Yeah.
But I think the other part here, just listening to what you're saying, is what went into that process. What questions did you ask? Because everybody always thinks it's just a moment, right? Like whether it's voluntary or not, that you just retire and it's done. Like you just peel the Band-Aid off. But clearly, you said it was a 2-day process. Those 2 days probably felt like the longest 2 days of your life. So maybe besides getting drafted, but those, that process, what was the questioning? What went into your mind? And, did you have something in mind when you said this has to be better? Did you have some kind of vision?
Yeah. I knew it was something to do with small business, and I knew it was something that had I would be hustling in it, and it was going to be me in charge because, I got a very strong work ethic, and I just get stuff done. That's it. I just knock things off my calendar and my to-do list like nobody's business. I'll wake up at 5 a.m. and I'll just get to work, and that's who I am. I identify as someone that just works hard. That's it. And so as soon as, that happened, I had to take that work ethic to figure out what I needed to do next. And so I've always been the guy to come up with something. I've always had, if I needed to make plans, I've always came up with, a way to make plans. If I needed to do something, I've always overcome it. As you've seen, every challenge I've overcome. So I just looked at it as another challenge, and I was just going to conquer it as well. And as far as the leadership skills, I knew I was strong at leadership, but I just didn't want to have to take any orders from anyone else again, especially if they're not going to work as hard as me. I believe the owner of the company, the CEO, the owner of an organization, the leaders, they are the ones that have to be working the hardest. Everyone wants to own their own company just to have hands off, but that's not how leadership works. You have to be the hardest working guy. And I looked at some of the people that are above me in baseball, and I didn't necessarily believe that. So that was what made me want to be my own boss and go my own way. And then after that, I just kind of followed the string in front of me wherever it went.
So when you did voluntarily retire and you went into that process where you're no longer a baseball player, maybe you still identified as that in terms of the work ethic and the leadership skills, what was that like for you? I mean, did you have any growing pains? Because as many transitions as you can go through, meaning getting traded, switching positions, going from college to pro, whatever it may be, it doesn't make the next transition that much easier. So talk to us about that. Yeah.
So definitely growing pains. That first month out of baseball was tough. It was really tough. I think the first couple days, it really didn't sink in. That drive back, so I drove down to Florida for spring training in my truck. That drive home was pretty emotional, not gonna lie. I sat there, I texted people that they're all expecting to see where I was getting assigned. And so because there's a couple days left of spring training. and AAA was about to leave. So I left like right on time with that. And so I was texting, all my old coaches, telling them I retired. And I remember it kind of hitting me real quick that, I wasn't a baseball player anymore. And so I stopped when I got to it was somewhere in Georgia or somewhere in South Carolina. And I got to the hotel that, was just halfway. And I, opened the door to get my bags out to go check in. And one of my bats fell out of the truck. And it kind of rolled towards like this dark forest. And it's like 11:30, 12 at midnight, and I like go and pick it up. And I like just fake that there's a pitcher there. And I like took a swing and it just felt completely different. Like I didn't even feel like a baseball player anymore. And it was not even a full 12 hours left. And at that point in time, it was like, well, what am I supposed to do next? And so I didn't have like a mission. I didn't have, I've always been that guy, like, it's always fun to go out and party and stuff, but it's not fun if you don't have a mission. It's not fun if you don't have like your main hustle. So I just was kind of like really just focusing on figuring out what was next. Didn't really have as much time to just like reminisce and get pissed off, because I was just like, I need something ahead. I need to look forward to something. So I kind of distracted myself with a lot of those feelings and emotions with, we got a job to do. We got to figure out what we're going to do next.
Yeah. I mean, that picking up that bat thing it gave me goosebumps, and I'm wearing a hoodie, so it's kind of weird, but it just reminded me of like a movie. Like that's like a movie scene.
Yeah. No, I remember it was so weird. I think it was actually in Savannah, Georgia. And it was like the bat I was using for all of spring training just fell out, and I didn't have enough room in my bat bag, and I just like it just fell out, and it like rolled, and I grabbed it, and I was like, wow, and I just kind of started laughing. It was a very strange feeling, but yeah.
But did that moment give you some kind of closure? Because to me, like if I want to be one of those people who's looking at this as like a sign, it's like the game extending its hand to you to say you gave it your all, now it's time to move on.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see it like that until a couple months later, probably. But I think it was just kind of a strange culminating point. Everyone always wants to go. For you to go out on top in baseball, if you really think about it, the only guys that really do that are the ones in the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I mean, it's. No one really gets to walk away in the most heroic fashion, but the way I did it, I'll tell you this day, I'll tell anyone that was there when I retired, they will say like I handled myself like very, very well. And I'm so proud of how I handled that situation. Even to this day, cause they released a bunch of my friends right after that, and they kept them in extended spring training for a little bit. And then they axed them after that. And, I was kind of thinking like if I had to go through that, I'd be very pissed.
Yeah. So, on your own terms is pretty close to the top. Quick, just side thing as we kind of move forward, and then Jared, I mean, if you want to close it out, you mentioned driving and having this, thought like I need to figure out what's next, what's this vision. Talk to us about that process, but the other thing in mind here is that like being a baseball player from high school to college, I know you went to the Cape along the way, then being in the minors and getting traded, transitioning to a different position with another team, they kind of always put in front of you what you had to do. Now you chose to retire, and nobody said you're retiring and doing X. So what was that like? I mean, and tell us what you did choose or what you're in the process of choosing now.
Right. Yeah. So pretty much there was like a week where I was like, it's probably like 2 days. I try to do everything really quick. So I don't know why, but that's just how I handle stuff. And I realized like if I don't want to work today, if I don't want to push this forward, it doesn't get pushed forward. If I don't want to do this, it doesn't get done. Like it's not like we have to go out for batting practice at this time, report at this time, go home, eat, get back here at this time. Like I can do whatever I want, but also I am responsible for whatever happens. So that was that. But I was kind of thinking like I had a couple like small jobs after I retired, just kind of distracting me and keeping me busy. And one of them was a marketing job for a strength equipment company. And I worked with them and increased their sales and through social media ads, and decreased all their costs, so they became like pretty profitable. And then they agreed to terms with a buyer to sell it, the whole company. And so once that happened, I started realizing, like, I actually have some serious skills. We talked on the phone, like baseball players don't realize they have actual skills, and that kind of came into play. And then I started meeting a ton of people. And then I realized, why don't I just try and, instead of starting a business, why don't I go try and buy a business? And so at this point in time, I'm looking to buy a couple companies, and probably, I don't know where the location is going to be, but it's been building up and culminating in this way for a while. So we'll see what happens.
That's awesome. And I guess one question that we kind of always want to leave off with guests is, if you had one piece of advice for current minor leaguers who are all kind of trying to find their identity outside of the game or make that transition outside of baseball, what would that advice be?
I would say be like one of those the Roomba vacuum robots. Like if you're just like start going in a direction, you have to take action though. You can't just think through everything. That's the mistake I kind of made at the beginning. You just have to move. You just have to text that person, make that call, do that thing, go attend that mastermind, take the course, whatever, and see where it leads you. And just taking action, you just kind of go down a path. And if it's not going to work, you hit off the wall and you like turn and you go find a new direction, and then you hit off another wall and you find, and that's how like everyone figures everything out. And I would say do that, but also like take your time and, figure out, what went wrong during your career and how you handled everything. And, kind of culminate that. And then don't root against people because of it. I found myself a couple days out, like rooting against the Orioles, but then I realized like all my friends got called up, and I was like, I can't root against these guys. They're just a bunch of goofballs, so I really didn't care. Once I got separated from the game, I realized how small it really was, and a lot of people in the world like have no idea what baseball is, and they know what baseball is, but they don't know the game as well as we do. And they didn't really care, if you're not going to be able to make them a little bit more money or have some kind of impact, whatever. So I would say be like that Roomba robot and just bounce off wherever you got to go.
Yeah, and I kind of love that. I love that ending just because it's kind of like never stop growing, always keep kind of pushing forward and trying to figure out who you are, because you're never going to stop figuring out who you are. You're always going to be on that constant journey.
Exactly. Yep.
But Ryne, we can't thank you enough for joining us on today. This was one of my favorite conversations I think that we've had so far. So we really appreciate it.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you. It's definitely clear that you took your shortstop and catcher mentality. And I think, if you want to look back, and especially to tell your father, I think you and your time with the Mariners and the Orioles was your MBA, because it harnessed those skills that you said that you are now using, right? But you kind of needed to go out there, test and push your limits to see how far you could go in baseball before you could enter the business world. But you're prepared for it, and that's the beauty. Yeah, definitely. I mean, just being able to handle those emotions, like going out and playing in front of 7,000 people. I remember we opened up my first game of low A was against Dustin Pedroia. There was 7,000 people in Greenville, South Carolina. And like, I was so nervous, but I'm also nervous before I go call somebody, an owner of a company. And I know how to handle those emotions now. And, that's a big thing, in baseball, you need to handle your emotions. Business is the same exact thing. It really is. Thank you, Ryne. Yeah. Thanks guys. I appreciate everything. And hopefully it gave you enough filler and good content.
Yeah, this was awesome. And yeah, we're pulling for you and hoping that you just all the success with your post baseball career.
Awesome. Thanks guys.